Let's do a quick survey. If I'd ask you the question, what is the most popular violin concerto? What would come to mind? Let's say top 3. For me personally, I would immediately go to, for example, Mendelssohn, Bruch, Beethoven, certainly to perform, as these are absolute standard works in the violin concerto repertoire. But now, let's say if I shift the question slightly and ask, what's the most popular theme or melody from a violin concerto? Like one that would be recognized by the most amount of people, just like that. Well, after thinking about this one a little bit, it occurred to me that it just might well be the one from the Butterfly Lovers Concerto. Say what? If you may not have yet known this piece, the Butterfly Lovers Violin Concerto, or Liangzhu as it's called in Mandarin, is a Chinese violin concerto that has sort of become emblematic of Chinese Western-style orchestral music, but has also gained great significance in general Chinese culture, due exactly to the fact that its alluring main melody seems to be known by Chinese people the world over, regardless of whether or not they're interested in the violin or in classical music in general. When I think back a long time ago, I've actually been listening to this particular tune even before I started playing the violin. And whenever I talk to Chinese people wherever I go, it's interesting seeing their faces just light up at the mention of Liangzhu or at the humming of its melody. So let's talk a little bit about this piece and the legend behind it. It was composed in 1959 by He Zhanghao and Chen Gang, so 2 students at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music, as a kind of musical representation of this very famous Chinese folk legend called the Butterfly Lovers. Simply put, it basically tells the tragic, romantic story of 2 star-crossed lovers, Liang Shanbo and Zhu Yingtai. So you can kind of think of it as having a lot of parallels with the story of Romeo and Juliet. This means that, unlike most violin concertos, this concerto is a programmatic piece of music in the sense that it portrays a particular narrative or story through the notes. And due to this, this concerto has sort of become the well-known symbol of this particular legend. And as a violinist, I find it particularly interesting as it puts me in a position to explore a very different sound world than usual. This piece is a combination of traditional Chinese melodies, Chinese flavor, style, with Western classical elements. So after all, it was written for violin and a Western-style orchestra. But when sound world is concerned, definitely takes from Chinese opera and the playing of traditional Chinese instruments. So let's briefly cover some examples of these Chinese elements in the solo violin part. The most immediately obvious thing when listening to the violin part is the extensive use of portamenti, or slides. Very much a part of Chinese singing, or playing of the erhu, for example, These slides, or huayin in Mandarin, can play a very significant role as a tool to convey certain emotions. So, for example, a slow upward slide at the distance of a semitone could serve as an expression of deep grief or anguish. A slow downward slide at the distance of a minor third can be used to convey a sigh or a complaint. A slow semitone back and forth bend could simulate weeping. And a faster version of said bend could be used to convey a sense of youthful energy, and so on. Something else that can be found in the violin part is the embodiment of different traditional instruments. So for example, here's a rhythmic motif that's typical of the guzheng, a Chinese zither-like instrument. Here's another example taken from a part of the piece that depicts Zhu Yingtai's fury and resistance towards her arranged marriage, in which the violin embodies the violent strumming of a pipa. For one last example of a Chinese element, in the interaction between violin and orchestra, there are even instances utilizing a tempo device taken straight from Chinese opera called 锦打慢唱, where a passionate melody is sung, or in this case played, freely over a rushing accompaniment. During a particular interview with He Zhanhao, so one of the two composers and the man who gave the concerto its main theme, he mentioned a quote from his music teacher to him, which spurred him to subsequently compose what he did, 看来小提琴必须民族化, which was roughly translated as, it seems that the violin should become a part of the national culture, which is really cool in the sense that through the violin, it is possible to get at the Chinese inner spirit or Chinese style or musical language. I find this fascinating, not only as a violinist, but as someone who is always keen to explore this part of my heritage. So to get deeper and deeper into this sound world, it's definitely a very interesting and meaningful challenge. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. And to all my Chinese friends out there, if you would have any particular stories or anecdotes, any personal experience with this particular piece, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. 可以视频下方留言跟我们分享一下. Would love to learn more. Anyway, see you next time.